Hi, good afternoon. I apologize. I got a little bit distracted here. Welcome back to one of our first in a long time webinars. Dr. Dracy and I were just sitting in my office this morning talking about the opening up of more parent webinars as we move through the last few weeks of our school year. And I'm really excited to get this one kicked off today. It's an important topic for all of us. We're all watching very carefully your children's progress as they have moved through this academic year, one that's probably going to be a little bit more memorable than we probably ever wanted it to be. I'm hoping that in some ways there have been some positives for your children, as there has been for mine, but also it's not a academic year that we've ever thought was something that's going to ever happen to us or our children. So we're moving through some uncharted territory, and we're trying to find some milestones, some posts, some connection to student progress and how they're moving through the academic year. And part of this tonight, this afternoon, this evening is for us to share with you our perspective on an important assessment tool that has been being used here at AES for a number of years. And I have used the Measure of Academic Progress exams in my schools since back in 2012, I think is when I started using that as a part of our measurement for program progress, looking to see how effective the school is, but also to help us to understand the progress that our children were making in classrooms. And so I'm going to turn it over to Shirley and let her do a little bit more introduction. But again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are going to be doing Q&A at the end of this, and there is that question box down there in the bottom of your screen down there, that if you can just put your questions in there, one question at a time, please. And we'll try to get your answers as we move through this webinar as well. Shirley?
Thank you, Andy. I'm Shirley Dracy, and I'm the Director for Teaching and Learning. And I too have been at other international schools that have been using MAP for the last 10, 12 years. And AES, you'll hear more detail about it from Dr. DeCardi in just a few minutes. But AES is not new to MAP, and it is an assessment that we have used and will be using to get a snapshot in time of how each child is doing. And it is linked to our curriculum standards, and it also gives us information about what are kids ready to learn next. So it's giving us information about what students are ready to learn in the classroom. And of course, it falls within a wider range of across the year. So just know that this is something that's part of our regular programs, part of our assessment buffet, if you will, or taking a look at how your child is progressing through the year and through our curriculum. So it's my pleasure at this time to introduce Dr. Amanda DeCardi, who is new to AES this year. She is currently the high school tech coordinator at AES. And Amanda comes to us with a rich background in a number of roles in education. She's been a teacher, a principal, a curriculum director, and most importantly for this evening's presentation, she has been a trainer with the organization who has created and does the data collection for us for the MAP assessments, and that's the Northwest Evaluation Association, NWEA. So Amanda, for several years before coming here, was a trainer with NWEA, working in international and national U.S. schools, schools around the globe. She's probably worked with over 250 schools in helping them to understand telling us. And she has done this kind of work, like I said, in a number of schools. She's also presented at a number of major conferences, including regional conferences in Europe and Asia. So it's my pleasure right now to introduce to you in this video, Dr. Amanda DeCarty, who's going to be giving us a lot of background information about the MAP assessment itself. So I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
Thank you, Dr. Dracy, for the introduction. My name is Amanda DeCarty, and I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you about the MAP assessment at the American Embassy School in Delhi. Now, AES has been giving the MAP assessment since 2011, so this is not something that is new. But what is new is that about a year ago, January, February, March, the world was thrown into a bit of havoc and COVID entered our lives. We made the decision not to give the MAP assessment at the end of last school year, to not give the MAP assessment at the beginning of this school year. And again, we decided to go ahead and regroup and define what it is and what our purpose is in giving this assessment. We're thrilled to be here today with you as parents so that you can be a part of this conversation to help our students. Now, AES, we talk about the joyful pursuit of excellence, balanced education in academics, athletics, arts, and service. This joyful pursuit means that we have always put the well-being of our students at the forefront. What we've learned through COVID is that we have to take care of their social emotional well-being more than ever. And it's important that all of us, the teachers, the administrators, the counselors, and parents are part of that process. That is why we are developing this common message, so that we have the common understanding to help keep it in perspective for our students. Now, I always look to Dr. Stephen Covey. He begins with the end in mind, and beginning with the end in mind is really defining what the purpose is for anything that we do. For the MAP assessment, we began by redefining what our purpose is when the senior leadership team came together in the middle of this school year. Before even talking about giving it or not, before we made the decision, we developed the common understanding as a team so that we understood the context of what the data was going to be giving to us. Now, after working with the senior leadership team, we did a deep dive with the AES data team. The data team really dug in deep into the different metrics that come out of the MAP assessment, and we found that we wanted to be focusing on growth. Now, after the data team, we've been meeting with each of the divisions, the elementary school teachers, the middle school teachers, and the high school teachers have all had conversations around MAP so far this year, which we'll continue to have. And then most importantly, we've been meeting with our student support services team as well. With learning support and English as additional language, their knowledge of the data is critical to ensure that we have growth for every child. What I want you to notice here on the right side of this screen, though, is parents. Parents are throughout this entire process. We need you to be our partners so that we can keep this in perspective for students and maximize growth for every single student. Now, as I mentioned, MAP is not something that is new at AES. Our school board has defined strategic priorities around learning. We want to ensure that we have growth in reading, in language, and math for every single student. For number 4 here, we want to ensure that we are using data to inform instruction. And that's the goal of MAP, is we are informing instruction. So our journey into informing instruction begins today with you being a part of the conversations that we've had to date. We're developing this common understanding and solidifying that common understanding of what MAP is. Those are the conversations that have happened at school, and we're thrilled to be here today talking to you about that as well. Now, when we come back in the fall, that's when we're really going to dig deep into this data. We'll begin by analyzing individual class and grade level reports, which will give us insights into achievement. But the most important piece with that is partnered in the growth data. We're looking forward to understanding the growth profile for every single student here. Once we have that information on achievement and growth, that's when we can impact instruction. That's when we can impact lesson planning. That's when we can have student conversations with students and with parents about what our common goals are on building on each student's strengths and targeting their areas of growth. So in developing this common understanding, I sometimes take for granted, oh, everybody knows what MAP stands for. I have to admit, when I first started working with MAP data about 12 years ago, I thought we were talking about geography. But that is not what the MAP assessment is. MAP stands for Measures of Academic Progress. And the key word there is progress. It's intended to help each student progress through a learning continuum, through a progression, if you will. There are about 5 things that I want to make sure you understand today that we've talked about with all of our teachers and that we'll be talking about with students as well. The first thing that I want you to understand is that it's an adaptive assessment. Now, as adults, we understand what adaptive means, but I'm going to push this with you and take it a little bit further. Yes, adaptive means that it changes with time. But let's take a look at what that can look like with this particular assessment. What we know is that when students get the first question correct, for example, the next student adapts and it becomes a little bit more challenging. If they get that answer correct, then it adapts and the next question becomes a little bit more challenging. If they get that incorrect, then the next question will become a little bit less challenging. And so it adapts based on how a student performs on each particular question. Now, what this essentially means is this is not a high stakes assessment like many of us have been familiar with in our past. This test is essentially designed so that students get about half of the questions correct and half of the questions incorrect. Our goal with this MAP assessment is to find their sweet spot, if you will. What is that spot that they are ready to learn today as far as the learning statements go? Now, each test starts maybe at a different at the same place, if you will. But depending on how a student does on the next question, their ending place may be a little bit different. Now, in seeing this, you'll see that there are 2 scores here at the end. This is the second thing that I want to focus on with you. This score is called a RIT score, which is on the RIT scale. Now, you and I grew up in a time of percentiles. I remember my Iowa Basic Skills test back in the 70s. I'm aging myself a little bit here, but it was 79th percentile or 23rd percentile. I'm not sure. It didn't have much meaning to me at the time. But as educators, percentiles are not useful to us if we are going to be maximizing growth. What we know about achievement is achievement cannot happen if a child is not growing. And so instead of percentiles, we focus on the RIT score. Now, RIT stands for really Rosh unit, but again, that's not helpful. And so a RIT score in our world stands for a Ready for Instruction Today level. That RIT score, that sweet spot, if you will. And so if a student earns a 195, that 195 RIT score is actually tied to learning statements on a learning continuum. These learning statements that you see on the right are tied to our curriculum, to our scope and sequence, to our standards, to our benchmark. And so that is helpful to us, is the RIT score for each and every student. Now, the RIT scale, it's equal interval, and it means that each band is about 10 RIT points apart. It really shows us that growth over time with students, and it's independent of grade level. Typically we'll go ahead and we'll see 3rd graders scoring at about a 180. Typically we'll go ahead and we'll see maybe 9th graders scoring around a 220 or a 230. But will we have 3rd graders scoring perhaps a 220 in a particular area? Absolutely. Does that mean they're ready to go to 10th grade and go into a 10th grade math class? It does not. It is one moment in time. And what it means is that on particular discrete skills, they have shown that they understand some of those concepts. But again, it gives us that ready for instruction today level on what they're ready for next. So how does this RIT score change over time? Now, if we're looking at this over time, typically at the beginning of the year, we'll see it a little bit lower. And then growth is measured throughout the entire year, and we'll see it go up in the spring. Typically, we'll see it go down then in the fall because of that summer brain drain. And that's just typical, but students rebound quickly. And when they are tested again, we'll go ahead and we'll see it go up. So it's normal to see it fluctuate. Now, as I mentioned with these RIT scores, it is not an infinite, it doesn't go on forever, if you will. The RIT scores generally go between 100 and 300. I mentioned third graders typically score around 180. Students in high school typically score around a 220 or so. But that key word is typical. Typical means that that's typically what's going to happen for the kids. But we also know that we do not have typical kids here. We have amazing parents. We have amazing educators. They have an incredible lifestyle here. They're incredibly supported. And so in many ways, our students are beyond typical. That typical score, though, is something to look at. When I say typical, that means students in that 50th percentile. That's typically what they're going to be scoring. We're going to have about half of the students scoring above that. We're going to have about half of the students scoring below that. But again, what we're focusing on is that ready for instruction today level so that we can maximize growth for every single student. Now, as I mentioned, those RIT scores are tied to learning statements within the learning continuum. And what that looks like is something that you'll see here. You'll see on the left side that the RIT band of 161 to 170 has learning statements. And then once students understand those skills, they move up to the next RIT band. And then once students understand those skills, they move up to the next RIT band. And so it goes all the way from about 100 to 300. What we focus on is reinforcing skills, developing skills, and introducing skills. So the data, if you will, is a roadmap. It tells us what they're ready for next, and that is what is important. Now let's talk a little bit more about this word typical. Typical is that typical growth that we may see. We have normative data which tells us what is typical. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that. Now we have what's called normative data that has been given to us. This is comprised of 40 million test events where NWEA or MAP has looked at data of all of these students around the world, and they've defined what is typical. So with this, we have what's typical at the beginning of the year. We have what's typical at the end of the year. We have it in mathematics, we have it in reading, we have it in language usage. Let's take a look at these mathematic norms for a second. If we're looking at a third grader, for example, a third grader at the beginning of the year in the area of mathematics typically scores a 188. That's at 50th percentile. So typically they'll score a 188. At the end of the year, they'll typically score a 201. So what we can infer is that a third grader typically will grow by about 12 or 13 RIT points. Let's go ahead and take a look at an eighth grader though. An eighth grader at the beginning of the year typically will score a 224. An eighth grader at the end of the year typically will score a 230. So we can infer that typically an eighth grader will go by 6 RIT points. There's a difference. Growth is not the same for every student. Growth is dependent on their starting place and what grade level they're in. We're going to see greater growth in the earlier years in each child's educational career. If we have third graders that are scoring perhaps in the 220 range, we're going to see less growth from them compared to their peers that are scoring at the 188. So that typical growth, that predicted growth, if you will, is dependent on the student's starting place and their grade level. That's something that we keep an eye on because that's part of the student's growth profile. We want to make sure that they're not typical, that they are set up for success and they are maximizing their growth. That's the important part we want to be focusing on. Now let's go ahead and look a little bit deeper on what we're going to be seeing as educators. So the data for educators is we are going to be looking at trends by class and by grade level. Yes, we're going to get a RIT score in mathematics, for example, but we can break it down even further according to the standards and benchmarks we use here at AES. You'll see, for example, that we can break math down into 4 different goal areas: operations, algebraic thinking, numbers and operations, measurement and data, and geometry. We can then see which areas to target, which areas are strengths, which areas are growth for students and for classes. We'll also see this data for individual students. Every single student will have an area of strength, and every single student will have an area of growth. It's not a weakness, it's an area of growth, and every single student will have one. So that's what we're going to be digging into. Now, what are you going to be seeing? The NWEA, or the MAP window internationally, is going to be closing on June 15th. We need the international window to close because that is when averages will be posted. When the averages are posted, that's when we're going to be sending home a student progress report to families. So that will happen after June 15th this school year. It will look something like this. You'll be able to see what the progress is for your child throughout their career here at AES. If they're new to AES, you will see only one data point. If they have been here for a longer period of time, you will see all of the data points. Over here on the right-hand side, though, is what I want you to focus on. This column right here is the RIT column. That's what we're focusing on as educators. If I look here for fall 2015, I'll see that the RIT score in mathematics for this particular child was 222. Now, what this means for you is looking over in the next few columns. This student was supposed to grow by 4 RIT points. They actually went down by 3. In this year, fall 2014, they were supposed to grow by 6 RIT points. They grew by 3 instead. In this year, fall 2013, they were supposed to grow by 7 RIT points, but they grew up by 8. I'm showing you that variability because I want you to understand how it fluctuates. One of our most important goals is to make sure we are getting accurate data. And that is why all of the divisions in elementary school, middle school, and high school, with the teachers, we've been talking about the importance of actually proctoring the test to make sure we're getting accurate data from the students. But it is also just one moment in time. So let's take a little bit closer look at this. When we look at this negative growth concept, you'll see in this example that a student in 4th grade typically is going to grow by 5 RIT points, but this student went down by 4. It is one moment in time. AES has a very wide assessment portfolio for each student. We have our external assessments like MAP. In the high school, we have the SATs and the PSATs. In the elementary school and middle, we have our DRAs. We, of course, have our internal formative assessments and our summative assessments. This is one piece of that 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle we work on over the holidays. Now, if negative growth happens, it's an opportunity to ask questions. How did that happen? Why did that happen? Sometimes students take too little time. 25 seconds on a question is not long enough. That will impact their scores. Sometimes effort fluctuates. We know that our students may not have stamina this term as they've not had the MAP assessment in a while. So we're building in breaks. We're feeding them before they take the assessment. And so keep that in mind, is that it's an opportunity to ask questions. But if we see one testing session where negative growth has happened, we won't worry. We'll instead what we call triangulate the data and look at all of those other assessment portfolio pieces. One thing that we will do, though, is if a student drops by 10 RIT points from the previous testing term, we'll automatically retest them, as we really want to make sure we're getting that accurate data for each student. So this is summarizing what I want to make sure you know about what MAP assessment is. What we've talked about as teachers and what we're going to be talking to the students about here at AAS. It provides information about the instructional level for each and every student, that ready for instruction today level, if you will. It gives us a roadmap for student progress. What are they ready for today and what's next? But most importantly, it is not a test for determining mastery of skills. It is not a high stakes achievement test for us. It is a growth tool. And we need for you to be our partner in sending that message to the students as they get ready for their spring assessments. Now here at AAS, we give the assessment 2 times a year, sometimes 3 times a year. There are sometimes students in the winter time in January, we're like, we need a little bit more information on them, or they may be new students coming in. And so we'll go ahead and do that 3rd testing session. We give the reading assessment from grades 2 through 10, though this term we're mostly testing just through grade 9 because our 10th graders will not be taking the MAP assessment next year. We also give the math assessment for grades 2 through 10. They don't need to bring a calculator in. The calculator automatically pops up on the screen if it's available for a particular question. And then we give the language usage assessment in grades 3 through 10. Now, some people say, why are we giving reading and language usage? Well, they're looking at 2 different components to a balanced literacy program. With reading, we're really looking at their analysis of themes, of details, of those key elements. With language usage, we're looking at their grammar. So it's that balanced literacy program that we're trying to get the data for. Now, the number one question I get from parents is, oh my gosh, what can we do to prepare for this? This is nothing you can prepare for. You don't cram for this. Preparing for it is what happens when students just go to school and they embrace learning. But here's my advice for you. Working with MAP data with my own children and with parents for the past 12 years, read to your children if they are younger. Read to your children if they're older. They actually like that too. Read with them and read around them. This COVID experience, I don't know about you, but it has kind of taken me away from books a little bit. And so I encourage you to pick up that book again and read around them. It's something that you value. It's something they will value. So read to your children with them, around them consistently. So that sums up the MAP assessment information that I'd like to share with you today. We'll go ahead and we'll answer some questions just after a few more words from people. I really appreciate you being here today and being our partner with data and really ensuring that each and every student is growing here at AAS. Thank you so much for the privilege of your time today.
All right, we are back, and your panel is here in front of you to answer a few questions. Shirley, I don't know if you wanted to say a couple of things before we turn it over and have the principals chat for just a couple seconds. You're muted.
All right, thank you, Andy. Yeah, parents, just know that this is the first information session you will hear about MAP in. You will be hearing more information as we go forward next fall and next year. Know that this is information that if you haven't been around MAP before, it can be, you know, kind of overwhelming to understand a lot of the details, especially in a very quick presentation that you've just seen. But know that teachers in the fall will be taking time with students and with you to understand the data that's in there. And of course, we will have further information sessions for you in the fall as well. So now the principals in each division are here to just give you a few details about how the MAP assessments will be scheduled and play out during this spring's test. So Charles?
Hi, thanks, Shirley. As we've communicated we're going to map test the first 2 weeks in May in the elementary school. We have to go over a course of 2 weeks because with elementary students, we give the 3 tests, 1 on each day. And in our current hybrid model, we have 1 week where group A is on campus for 3 days, and then the next week, group B. So we'll do it over a course of 2 weeks. I would just add the one thing that I loved, I saw a parent ask a question or make a statement about what's the school do with it? And I just love that question because that's how I view the MAP test. It's not some huge characterization or hear all end all statement about your child and what they know or don't know. It is a tool that we use to help us meet the academic needs of your child and know how to tailor the instruction and to meet them where they are. So again, not high stakes. We want them to do the best they can. So that day, if you'll just encourage them to give their best effort, make sure they're well rested. But it is definitely a tool. It is something that helps us and is not the hear all end all of anything really. But it is very, very valuable information. Anthea?
Thank you, Charles. Anthea?
Thanks, Charles. I'm just going to carry on from what Charles said and reinforcing this is a really important piece of data that we do use in the middle school. But it is one piece of data. The biggest one is the ongoing assessments that our teachers use because they're the most consistent and reliable and see kids in a range of different times and etc. But we use it along with things like DRA. So we correlate like what does the reading look like, and then we have a diagnostic test that we use to sort of get a kid's reading level in the middle school. We also have started using the ISA writing assessment just to get a standardized sort of look at our middle schoolers' writing, normed against some like schools. So again, they're all pieces of data that are very helpful, and we would never want to hold on to one piece as being the most important thing. Anything can go wrong on one day. So in saying that, we spend some time with kids before the test. I can't stress enough, the kids need to own this is their learning and this is what they know and what they can share about their learning. And so their advisors will spend some time just talking a bit about the test. Again, not overplaying it, but just saying, this is about you doing your best and sharing with us what you know, explaining a little bit about 50%. You're not expected to get everything right. It's not designed that way. And so advisors will do a little bit on that on the Wednesday, and they'll also get them just to do a quick reflective thing at the end, just to get their sense of it and what they found challenging and what surprised them, just so we get a bit of a read on how they're doing with that. In terms of logistics, the middle school, every division has a slightly different structure for having kids on campus. Because these are going to be done in very small groups, we can bring them on, everyone's going to come on a Wednesday. They will test in their advisory groups, which are very small groups in the middle school, and we're staggering the grade levels, which you'll get information about if you haven't already got it, the time to arrive at school, so that we don't have all middle school arriving at the same time. We're limited with space and we want to respect the physical distancing. So we'll have the testing on 3 Wednesdays, and then there will be a makeup for some students who can't attend on, particularly on this first week. And we'll reach out to those of you that need that option. The best thing we're advising students and parents, of course, is a good night's sleep. Bring a snack. Kids will go home at lunchtime when they're done. And if they're waiting for a sibling, they can wait in the hop, because we are staggering the start time a little bit. So the end time will also be staggered. But really, it's just about doing their best and sharing what they know so that we can take the data and triangulate it with other pieces of data.
Thanks, Anthea. Iftikhar, high school.
Thank you. Well, along the same line of what Charles and Anthea just spoke about, yeah, this is one of the data pieces that we see out of many of the data pieces that we have at high school for each of our students. Through many sorts of assessments we do. Some are standardized, some are our internal assessments that we do. Through the month of May, all our high school students will be doing their semester exams in their classrooms. So we didn't want to add the MAP testing also in May. So we chose 3 dates. In the end of April, where all the 9th grade students will be able to take this MAP test in the month of May before they get into their usual business of their end of semester exams. The dates for high school are April 22nd, 28th, and 29th. On those 2 days, we will have the 3 different subjects for all 9th grade students. We're gonna share a special schedule to all the students. The way we are trying to do it in high school is we are only bringing in 9th grade that morning, a little earlier than usual. So they have a separate, specific, dedicated time to do the math. And all the rest of the classes that day for all the students will be shortened by 15 minutes. So the morning, those 2 days will be just math for 9th grade. And the classes for 9, 10, 11, 12th grade will start a little late. We will share all those details with the students and parents, but just so you know that there'll be 3 tests in 3 different days. Any students who happens to miss one of those days for, let's say they are sick or some other things, we'll have a small window of time and we'll try to get those tests done in the following week. But knowing that they will also have other exams, it could be a tough one to manage. Yeah, please make sure that your kids have a really good night's sleep. Last time I heard about that, it should be around 9 hours. Make sure they have a good breakfast and send some snack with them. So when they have a time, they can eat some snacks to finish the test. Some students finish it in 30 minutes, some take the full 60, 70 minutes. So they will have a break before they go to the next class on those days. That's it from high school.
Okay, thanks, Iftikhar. Hey, I see a couple questions about wanting to know the exact schedule. Parents, if you haven't received it yet, each division principal will be sending out information about the MAP assessment schedules as it becomes timely for the division students. So have no fear. You will all be informed appropriately ahead of time about that. Andy, any last comments?
Yeah, I've got Rupi asked a really good question. I'm typing an answer to her here, but let me answer it out loud. I thought it was a really good one. She asked, do educators feel there's a COVID brain drain? Do you expect the MAP scores may not be where they would normally be given the unusual year we've had? And, you know, I think that, I don't know if I'd use the word brain drain, Rupi. Probably would like to maybe look at it more as probably not as active of a learning progression as Amanda described. There's been, you know, all kinds of conjecture thrown out in the media and even amongst educators around the world around this idea. NWEA did a study earlier in the year, and they've continued to update that information for schools. And what they're seeing around the world is that students, that they're seeing more progress in reading and language arts than they are in mathematics. And depending on the program and the amount of time that students have been in classrooms and also in appropriately engaged in online learning, the progress is at times unpredictable. We are obviously not expecting that our kids will have moved as far forward this year as they would have in a normal time. I think that should not be a surprise to anyone. What is really important for us to understand here at AES is where your students are now, what the RIT bands are that we can target for that instruction, and us getting that information into teachers' hands and into our instructional leaders' hands so that they can help to design and implement instruction that's appropriate for our students for where they are now and to move them forward in their educational journey. This is about, as Amanda said in her presentation, it's about growth. It's about finding out where kids are, what that next step is, and what that next step after that is, and so on. And we've been spending a lot of time helping each other inside of AES and with each of the divisions to understand how to look at these reports, how to understand them, and how to move kids forward from that point forward. So again, I think we don't want to, kids hear what we're saying. And I want to make sure that we don't use words like learning loss or brain drain. I get a little uncomfortable with that because the kids are learning. They're working hard. They're focusing on what they can do, considering the circumstances, and we should celebrate their progress one way or the other. They're resilient and they're amazing, and our kids are amazing at this school, and we're going to be really proud of whatever they accomplish on this test. They just need to show us what they can do so we can take that next step forward.
Anyone else have any last comments? And I know that a couple different people are still answering questions that are in the Q&A.
There's somebody asked, I see somebody's answering that question. Thank you, Nada. We're not testing students who are not coming to campus. So if your kids are not coming to campus, they aren't getting that exam. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add that we actually researched this directly with MAP, and it is not recommended by MAP itself. This is not exclusively a choice we're making. MAP itself says that they're not recommending that students who can't come to school test. So of course that impacts many schools which aren't even open yet, that they've not been able to administer it, same as last year.
Final question or two. Are there any other unanswered questions that we need to take here? Charles, one last time, grade 2 testing or testing in elementary, and you're on mute.
Thanks, Shirley. The first week of May, I think it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, will be Group B, 2nd grade through 5th. The second week of May, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I believe, is Group A, and that's when they will test. So we'll have 2nd graders testing in both weeks. It'll be Group B the first week and Group A the second week.
And again, parents trust that you will get a written communication, most likely more than once, to help you understand and be ready for when your child's going to be tested. Okay. Last call. Any other comments, questions? Andy, do you want to wrap us up?
I will. Thank you, Shirley. Amanda couldn't be here tonight to answer questions personally, but I will pass along from her regrets and to thank everyone for coming and listening. I hope that you got your questions answered. If you did not, please reach out to us. We're here to help. We're looking forward to your support in this process, and please look for further information on other interesting opportunities for webinars here in the next coming weeks. Thank you very much for coming this evening.